Hi again. So last year, the 2014 thesis cohort identified the desire for current students in visual and critical studies to forge stronger relationships with our alumni. They also wanted to initiate a way to recognize and honor the amazing work done by our alumni community. Thus, the VisCrit Alumni Award was created, and the first VCS Bronze Pencil was bestowed upon a VCS alumni. This award serves to recognize work produced after graduation that exemplifies the interdisciplinary and socially engaged values of the VCS program. Specifically, the VisCrit Alumni Award acknowledges the innovative and diverse ways VCS graduates mobilize the skills they honed and the ideas they germinated while at CCA in a broad range of creative and professional arenas, further evidencing the versatility of the degree and the luminosity of our community. This year, when our graduating thesis cohort came together to select the recipient of the 2015 VisCrit Alumni Award, we developed a set of criteria to evaluate the year's nominees. We agreed that the person who won the award should exemplify interdisciplinarity. As you have witnessed today, all of us are working at the intersections of diverse disciplines. 7 of the 9 of us will graduate as duals, earning degrees in fine arts, curatorial practice, and writing, alongside the MA in visual and critical studies. The 2 MA candidates here also have interdisciplinary practices as poets and artists beyond the scope of their visual and critical studies work. We also agreed that the person to whom we award this honor should embody the program's commitment to social justice. After today's presentations, again, I am sure that you have been able to see how the VCS program fosters a profound engagement with questions about power structures, representation, and the terms of our visual culture. But we had a specific desire to award the VisCrit Alumni Award to someone whose work goes beyond the realm of academia and seeks meaningful engagement in the real world. Additionally, many of our VCS alumni leave the Bay Area after graduation, and while working in the local community is not a requirement for receiving the award, our cohort was excited by this year's recipients' commitment to the Bay Area before, during, and after attending the VCS program. With our criteria in place, our selection for this year's VisCrit Alumni Award was a clear choice, and I am honored to announce on behalf of the VCS cohort of 2015, this year's VisCrit Alumni Award recipient is Dwayne De Nerval. In addition to being honored today with the VCS Bronze Pencil, Dwayne will receive an honorarium for presenting his work at a Wednesday forum, our department's guest speaker series, next year. And you can also look for a profile of Dwayne's work on the CCA website in the fall. I'm happy to bring 2 of my peers, Irina and Takima, to the podium to introduce you to Dwayne.
Hello, and it is our pleasure to introduce Dwayne to you today. I was first introduced to Dwayne and his work through Irina, actually, who talks about him, and through VCS's very own Sightlines publication. As a first-year student in the program, I took the advice of some of my instructors and went through a few volumes of Sightlines to get a feel for what I had just gotten myself into, and also find some inspiration. And the first essay that piqued my interest and got me really excited about the type of work that I would be able to do here in the program was Dwayne's Defining the Afroscape through Ground Drawings and Street Altars. And as someone whose academic interests are rooted in a love of Black culture and Black heritage, and also somebody who is fascinated at the point where creativity and divinity intersect, his work really struck a chord. And since then, I've had the honor of hearing him speak and experiencing his work in person, and also engaging him in some illuminating conversation.
I first met Dwayne during the Decolonize or Occupy Oakland encampment in the fall of 2011. And while our contact was limited, I understand Dwayne to be a dedicated, creative, hardworking individual with a certain old school sort of vibe that I deeply appreciated. He struck me as being very committed to bridging cultural and political work within various public spheres. Shoot forward a little less than a year, and I find myself in the CCA boardroom attending the annual reports from the field, works in progress in visual and critical studies. Perhaps you can imagine my surprise when I realized it's the same Dwayne De Nerval presenting as VCS alum. He spoke passionately about his investment in developing what he calls the Afriscape and sacred ground drawings and altars. He also spoke about the Sankofa Cultural Institute, which he helped to co-found. In the midst of deciding which graduate school that I would attend, I remember time spent at the encampment, QPOC meetings we attended, and thought, if these are the kind of people that become students here, then this is a much easier choice than I had thought. Yesterday, Terza shared a story with us that I'd like to share with you too, and it was about Dwayne's time spent in the VCS program. Both Terza and Kate, for here, had a saying apparently that when someone felt frazzled, there was conflict, or just simply too much work to be done, as is always the case, they would say, quote unquote, do as Dwayne does. We like that story. And I think that that statement, do as Dwayne does, says a lot about who Dwayne is and the kind of presence and spirit that he brings to everything that he does. And so, if there's anyone that will be class of 2016, I suggest pencil concept. Dwayne De Nerval is a visual artist, writer, and scholar of visual culture. His area of expertise is African and Afro-diasporic visual culture. As the co-founder of Sankofa Cultural Institute, he was the creative director of 3 symposiums on jazz history and has lectured widely on the topic of jazz and visual culture at galleries, museums, universities, and colleges. De Nerval is an alumni columnist for the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's Open Space blog.
And in addition to this, he is also the co-author of Black Artists in Oakland, which is a visual history that was published by Arcadia Publishing. And he was one of several cultural theorists chosen to work in the Future of Soul think tank at the Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Most recently, he completed a month-long artist residency at the Crow's Work Gallery in Oakland, which I had the pleasure of seeing. And he co-founded the Oakland Maroons Art Collective as a teaching artist for the Imagine Bus Project. He designs lesson plans and curriculum. I don't know why I'm nervous. Lesson plans and curriculum for teaching art to incarcerated youth. And he graduated from the Visual and Critical Studies program in 2009. So without further ado, should we bring the rest of the cohort up here? Yeah, come on.
No. We're handing off the sword.
Wow.
Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Yeah. I can't tell you how happy I am to be here right now, and well, now I'm getting nervous. How can one live up to an introduction like that? That was fantastic, really. I've never had a better introduction than that. I can't thank the cohort enough for choosing me for this particular honor, and I think it's probably the best honor that I've ever gotten, really. So I'm supposed to say a few words, and I'm going to keep it to a few words, really. I'll give you just a little bit of background, but usually what I do in this particular instance, there's so many people that I need to thank, but I usually put my ancestors first, because they're right about this whole thing about me focusing on African and African diasporic culture and expression. And I want to thank and remember and honor first and foremost my ancestors, specifically Bertha Wilson and Albert Raymond De Nerval. So by way of that, those are my folks from Bogalusa, Louisiana, and New Orleans, Louisiana. those folks, right? And they really set me on a path before I knew that I was on a path. What I want to say about that, I'm going to skip forward to something that makes, I think, my experience here at CCA unique, in that I did my undergraduate studies here from 1979 to 1982. Okay, so I got here in the mid 1980s with the culture wars in the 80s culture wars in full bloom and everything, and they were still teaching this kind of formalist Eurocentric art history there. And as a result, there were some good things that actually happened from that, which is we had a lot of contentious debate and argument and stuff like that inside the cafeteria at CCAC. I still fondly remember those conversations. And so that was a really actually a good thing that happened. The second thing that happened to me was that there was a gentleman there that was the founder of and head of the department that became the Ethnic Studies Department. He created the Ethnic Studies Department. His name is Michael Ochosi. Well, actually, his name was Michael Wright at that particular time. And he was an activist and eventually became a priest of the Yoruba religion. And the things that he did inspired me such that at a certain point, he married my wife and I in a Yoruba ceremony about some decade and a half later on when I met my wife, Adiba. So another excellent thing about being the secretary, he made me the secretary of the Ethnic Studies Department. And so being the secretary of the Ethnic Studies Department, I also got to sit in there and listen to a lot of the conversations that the professors were having, and they had their contentious arguments too. And a lot of them were activists as well and things of that nature. So that kind of set me on the path, right? After I got out of CCA with this undergrad in BFA in drawing and illustration, the thing that those arguments and discussions, et cetera, and so forth did for a good deal of us black students that were at CCA at that time, and I learned later on other institutions where similar things were happening around the country, is that it made us really very serious about studying this African diasporic and what we consider to be a black aesthetic with a great deal of rigor and seriousness, without knowing specifically how it is we would make some career path out of it, right? And so this led me to start teaching this Afro-Brazilian martial art called Capoeira. And so at the same time I'm doing my visual artwork, I'm teaching Capoeira in neighborhoods in East Oakland and West Oakland, sometimes to formerly incarcerated youth, et cetera, and so forth. And it's a way of connecting people to an art form that was born in some resistance and people who were resisting oppression, and talking about Middle Passage and all those types of things. So it gives identity formation for these young folks. So why did I mention that? That's part of the meandering path that I'm trying to emphasize here. The meandering path that I've been taking didn't really have like I say, a career trajectory to it. And so the pathway that I've taken to build my knowledge base is not a direct career path. My approach to knowledge production has been very non-linear in nature. It's given me a unique set of peer groups and expressive communication skills to move between those groups. So when I first heard about the Visual and Critical Studies Department at CCA, I said, "You mean to tell me they do that on purpose in a classroom setting?" Yeah. Sign me up. So I began the program in 2007. Like they said, I graduated in 2009, and the experience was invaluable, to say the least. The contrast between dealing with the formalist Eurocentric art history that I was subjected to in the 80s and the VCS department was immediately felt. The open, wide-angle, egalitarian approach to the visual field and visual culture provides, it was refreshing. So I was excited about the skills and knowledge that I had gained here, and less than a handful of months after that, I was in a local gallery in Oakland doing a series of talks about visual culture, just because, right? And just because I was excited about getting the information that I'd learned here to just the general public. So it's here that I really began to feel comfortable with the interdisciplinary nature of my work. Skills that I had acquired in this program culminated in an artist residency that I completed earlier this month at the Crowswork Gallery in Oakland. My visual art was on display. I delivered 3 keynote lecture presentations, completed 2 installation pieces, and a collaborative sound piece, all with ideas and themes that I worked on in my VCS studies here. So the notion of the Afroscape and all those things, those things were sparked and ignited and kept going for me right here in this environment. And that's why I'm so grateful to have experienced this. So through VisCrit, they enabled me to expand my interactions with some like-minded scholars. And so I met the African diaspora and philosophy scholar Robert Ferris Thompson in the mid-'80s while performing as a Capoeira practitioner at Berkeley. But I had the opportunity to really engage him closely with him and help him in this with a VisCrit professor when he was putting together this symposium here on aesthetics. So just last year, I was invited to deliver a paper at a symposium in New Orleans for the 30-year anniversary of Professor Thompson's book, The Flash of the Spirit. And as a result of that presentation, an influential curator recommended me to do a lecture at the LA Museum of Contemporary Art in June of this year on a film installation by Khalil Joseph. Now, I'm telling you this for a reason. Bear with me. The Khalil Joseph film was commissioned by this guy named Kendrick Lamar. He's a rapper. Anybody familiar with Kendrick Lamar? Okay, cool. So just this past Thursday, I did a lecture presentation for some youth in Oakland, and it was titled Images in Radical Black Music from Max Roach to Kendrick Lamar. And tomorrow, I'll be teaching art to incarcerated youth here in San Francisco. So the reason I'm mentioning this stuff is because if there's any skill that I would encourage the cohort to develop in VCS, it would be to learn how to modulate critical theory in ways that enable you to present those ideas to widely divergent audiences, widely different audiences. My audiences range from incarcerated teenagers to university professors in a museum setting. The ideas in critical theory are powerful, and they deserve to be parsed out in ways that everyone can access. And so that's one of the skills and ambitions that I had when I was here, and this is what I've been continually working on in my meandering path. So my experiences here have been invaluable, like I said before, and so I'm gonna end right here and say that I've never felt more like I'm doing what I'm supposed to do in the world than since I've left this particular program. It really set me on a path to do more poignantly what I'm supposed to be doing with my stuff in my community. So thank you very much.